I was 5 when I first saw my mother. Not the way other children see their mothers, in photographs or through foster parents' stories of the woman who left me in that alley. No, I saw her the way I would always see her. Impossible, beautiful, and mine alone. It was my birthday, though I hadn't expected much celebration. The Kendricks were kind enough foster parents, but they had 4 other children to mind. I sat alone upstairs, pushing my only gift, a used blue Matchbox car, back and forth across the worn wood floor, making engine sounds with my lips as I imagined grand adventures. Then she was there, standing by my window. The late afternoon light seemed to shine through her at odd angles, but I was too young to understand why that should be strange. She wore a crisp military uniform I wouldn't recognize as the dress blues of the Admiralty until years later. Gold embroidery with a crown, crossed swords, and 2 stars on her shoulders, and a tiny, gleaming, star-studded emblem on her collar. Her silvered hair was pulled back severely, but her eyes, my eyes, though I didn't know it then, were soft and filled with tears. "Hello," I said, because the Kendricks had taught me to be polite. She startled, a hand flying to her mouth. "Can you see me?" I remember thinking, what an odd question that was. "Of course. Should I shut my eyes? Are we playing hide and seek?" "No," she whispered, kneeling beside me. "No, darling. Can you take my hand?" I reached out without hesitation, the way only a child can. Her hand felt like morning wisp, almost there, almost solid, like trying to hold a memory. But I could feel it, and that seemed to make her cry harder. "Are you sad?" I asked, concerned by her tears. "No, oh gosh, no," she said, in that crisp lilt of a naval professional. "I am so happy. I've waited so long to finally meet you." She paused as if considering something. "And I didn't know if you could see me this early." "Then why are you crying?" "Because sometimes happiness is so big it spills over." I nodded, accepting this with a child's simple wisdom. "Would you like to play cars? This one goes very fast. It was my birthday present. It's a mini." I demonstrated with appropriate sound effects. She laughed, a bright, clear happiness that had reached deep inside me. "I would love to." We played together in that small room, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor. She asked about my life, my school, and my friends, in a way that seemed more than adult politeness. When I told her about getting pushed in the playground, she taught me how to stand so I wouldn't fall next time. When I mentioned struggling with reading, she showed me a trick for breaking down words that would later impress my teachers. I didn't ask who she was. "I have to go soon," she said as the shadows lengthened. "Will you come back?" "Yes, on your birthdays, sometimes," she said. "I can't promise to be there, I just don't know." "Only birthdays?" "Only birthdays." She reached out, her hand brushing my cheek like morning fog. "But that makes them special, doesn't it? We've had—" and she'd seemed to catch herself. "We will have many together." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "But," she said simply, "no one will believe you if you tell them about today." "That's okay," I said. She touched my shoulder, and I felt fuzzy and warm as she said, "Some things are just for us to know." Her smile then, proud and sad and loving all at once, would stay with me through years of birthdays to come. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered, and then she was gone. Mrs. Kendrick found me still sitting there at dinner time, playing quietly with my car. "Were you talking to someone up here, James?" she asked, kind but concerned. "Just playing," I said, remembering what the lady in the uniform had said. Some things were just for us to know. It would be years before I understood what had happened that day. Years of birthdays, some with her, some without. Years of learning to hold conversations that no one else could hear. Years of wondering if I was mad. But sitting there on my bedroom floor, 5 years old and holding a tiny blue Mini, all I knew was that my mother had finally found me, and that somehow, somewhere, she would always find me again. Chapter 1. The Commander's Game. April 15th, 1997. I almost didn't go to the arcade that day. The other kids from Greenwood Home had teased me about my scores again, how I could barely get past the first wave of aliens before my pocketful of 10p ran out. But it was my birthday, 9 years old, and Mrs. Harrison had slipped me £1 after breakfast, her eyes soft with pity. "Treat yourself, James," she'd said. "Everyone deserves something special on their birthday." The arcade itself was really just 3 machines crammed into the corner of Mr. Patel's chip shop, but the neon signs in the window made it feel like somewhere else entirely. Somewhere beyond the grey London afternoon and the smell of vinegar and fish. The Area 51 cabinet hummed in the corner, cycling enticingly through scenes of impossible battles against alien invaders. I had 1 coin left, 1 chance. I'd watched the older kids play enough to know the theory, how to dodge, when to reload, where the power-ups appeared. But my hands always shook too much, my reactions too slow, my aim too uncertain. Between one heartbeat and the next, she was there, standing beside me in full combat gear that seemed to gather shadows around it. Her insignia must have been an officer, but I didn't know what rank that was then. It caught the flickering light from the screen, and dark streaks marked her face like war paint. She looked so exhausted, like my foster parents after long, long days at work. Somehow, it made her seem much older than 2 years before, but her eyes were laser bright and focused. "You missed my 8th birthday," I whispered, hoping none of the kids would hear me talking to myself, feeding my last coin into the slot. "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry." Her voice was rough, like she'd been shouting orders. Sometimes the battles choose their own timing. The game started, and I grabbed the blaster, already tensing for inevitable failure. But she stepped close behind me, and I felt a whisper of memory, not quite touching, as her hands settled over mine on the weapon. "Relax your grip," she murmured. "Let the target come to you. Don't chase it." Her fingers guided mine, showing me how to lead the shots, how to anticipate movement patterns. "See? They're predictable once you understand their programming. Just like real combat, superior technology often means predictable responses." Under her guidance, my score began to climb. The klaxon kept chirping my victories. A few kids drifted over to watch, then more. Through wave after wave, she taught me with touches as faint as starlight. When to take cover, how to manage resources, and why sometimes retreat was the better part of victory. "They're using standard attack formations," she whispered, her breath almost rustling my hair. "Just like the Imperium. They never expect you to think differently, to change the rules of engagement." My hands had stopped shaking. The blaster felt natural now, an extension of intention rather than an awkward tool. As I cleared another level, the growing crowd gasped, my score climbing into territory usually reserved for the older kids' initials. "That's it. she said softly. "You see it now, don't you? The patterns in chaos, the mathematics of combat." I did see it. Every motion, every decision flowing into the next, like a dance we'd choreographed together. The final boss appeared, and I felt her smile against my shoulder. "Show them, James. Show them how a Whitehall fights." The crowd erupted as the screen flashed, "New high score." Someone clapped me on the back. Mr. Patel emerged from behind his counter to see what the commotion was about. Hands shaking now with triumph instead of fear, I entered my initials, JTW. I turned to share the moment with her, but she had stepped back. Her uniform seemed to absorb the arcade's neon glow, and her eyes held secrets I wouldn't understand for years to come. She snapped a crisp salute, pride radiating from her stance. "Happy birthday, soldier," she said, leaving me surrounded by admirers who couldn't understand why their congratulations felt hollow compared to that phantom salute. I never went back to the arcade. The next time Mrs. Harrison offered me a coin, I asked for astronomy magazines instead. Because I'd learned something that day, beyond high scores and attack patterns. I'd learned that the real battles, the ones that mattered, were being fought in the space between stars. Years later, when I first looked through my telescope at the patterns of light wheeling overhead, I remembered her hands guiding mine, teaching me to see the order in chaos, the strategy in stars. Some lessons, it turns out, are just for us to know. Chapter 2. The Astronomy Afternoon. April 15th, 2002. My fifth foster parents' house sat on the outskirts of London, where the city's glow finally surrendered to actual darkness. Perfect for the telescope that helped fill a void I did not want to admit. I'd spent the morning setting it up. A second-hand reflector Mr. Tsu from the astronomy club had helped me find. Something about the way he explained the dances of stars spurred me on, searching for patterns in the chaos. 14 years old today, and I was still finding my place in the universe, though now through starlight instead of pixel-bright explosions from endless video games. The afternoon shafts of the sun slanted through my window, catching dust motes like tiny spinning galaxies. My notebook lay open on the desk, crowded with my cramped scribbles about celestial patterns and star charts. Knowing it would never be my vocation, what 14-year-old does know, but giving me comfort once again on my birthday. Then she was there. It seemed to be her mode, not arriving, not approaching, just there, sitting on the edge of my desk with curious eyes. Wearing a lieutenant's uniform this time, I'd started to figure out some of the stripes, and it was crisp and new-looking. She seemed quite a bit older than me, maybe twice my age, but I had no idea how old women were. Her hair was tied up, but a few strands had escaped, somehow making her more human. But much younger and fresher than the battle-worn officer who had guided my hands on the blaster 5 years before. It still bothered me not being able to understand how she was so different each birthday, and yet so much the same. And I never did understand how she could stand or sit, but couldn't seem to touch me or anything else. "Is that Bowditch's Practical Navigator?" she asked, gesturing at a text on my desk. "I remember studying that at the academy." I picked it up and turned it over. "You know celestial navigation?" I asked her. I tried not to sound too eager, but lately I'd been full of questions about everything she knew, everything she was. Even though I had seen her most birthdays, She'd always been much older than this. Always serious discussions. The visits were so short that I felt like I had never gotten to know her. Today seemed lighter. Even her smile seemed more relaxed and more casual, as if this was just any other day in the life of a 14-year-old and his mother in uniform. She chuckled. Hard to command a starship without it. Gotta know the basics. Sometimes tech breaks or gives you a bad answer. Sometimes the old ways are the surest. She paused, studying my star charts. You've been busy? I nodded, then hesitated. Can I see your arm? She twisted on the desk and tilted her head quizzically. Why? But she pulled back her sleeve. Of course, you've never told me. They're all missing. My mind raced back to every visit, trying to remember when I'd first noticed the strange markings that would appear on her arm. They had always been there until now. I've never told you what? She examined her bare arm with genuine curiosity. The tattoos. You always have them. Will have them, I mean. I stumbled over the impossible tenses of our relationship. Every other time I've seen you, you have these marks on your arm. Star patterns. But now they're not there. Her eyes widened with that sharp intelligence I was learning to recognize. Show me. I grabbed my graph paper, covered in my primitive attempts at mapping the stars. I've been trying to create something, a way to track when we meet. See, I've been studying celestial navigation, and I thought maybe... I licked my lips. Maybe we could create patterns that look like star charts, but mean something more. She shifted from the desk to stand beside me, even more intent on my notebook. Tell me more. My words tumbled out in a rush of enthusiasm. Each visit could be its own constellation, like, see here? I sketched quickly. This 5-pointed star could represent my age when we first met, with these smaller stars showing you where you were in time. And these lines connecting them, they could mean something too, like this one here. It's the way you taught me to stand so I wouldn't get pushed down in the playground. She leaned forward, her lieutenant's curiosity mixing with something more profound, more maternal. You remember that? I remember everything, I said softly. Every visit, every lesson, every time you've helped me understand something impossible. I just thought maybe we could create a map of it all. Something that looks like navigation marks to everyone else, but tells our story to us. Her fingers traced above my sketches, not quite touching the paper. It would need to be precise, she said, slipping into what I recognized as her teaching voice. Real star charts follow mathematical principles. The positions matter. The relationships between points create meaning. Like us, I blurted out, then felt my cheeks warm. I mean, the way we keep meeting, but it all makes sense somehow. Her smile was radiant. Exactly like us. She gestured to my astronomy textbook. Open it to Great Circle Navigation. Let me show you something we learn at the Academy about plotting stellar positions. We spent the next hour creating our secret language in the shifting sunlight. She taught me about sextants and celestial plotting, about how ancient mariners had traced their paths across endless oceans by following the stars. I showed her my ideas for encoding emotional resonance into the connecting lines. hope rising like the summer constellations, grief falling like autumn stars. "This one," I said, drawing carefully, "could be for today. See how the stars balance? Because it feels different, easier somehow, like we're just—" I trailed off, unable to explain. "Like we're just a mother and son spending an afternoon together," she finished quietly. "Yes, I see it." She studied her bare arm thoughtfully. "These will work perfectly. Small enough to pass as standard navigation marks, complex enough to hold meaning, and you'll be able to read them, to know when you're seeing me, to track when I am. You'll really do it? Mark each visit?" "Of course." She reached out for my shoulder with that gossamer memory touch. "Some things are just for us to know, remember? But now we'll have a map to follow." The afternoon had sped by, and I knew our time was up. "When will I see them? The tattoos?" "Next time you see me, whenever that is in your timeline. Look for the marks. They'll prove this is real." She stood, straightening her uniform. "And James, thank you for giving us a way to hold on to each other." Then she was gone, leaving me with pages of star patterns and the certainty that somewhere, somewhen, she was already carrying our story on her skin. I spent that evening at my telescope, watching the real stars wheel overhead. For the first time, I truly understood that the universe writes its stories in circles, in the paths of planets, in the orbits of moons, and in impossible stories. Chapter 3. The Cambridge Evening, April 15, 2006. Over the past 2 terms, the oak-panelled set I shared with 3 other freshers had become my sanctuary. Our small sitting room felt particularly welcoming tonight, its worn leather chairs and crowded bookshelves offering refuge from the persistent spring rain and the weight of expectations. 18 today, though birthdays felt different here, absorbed into the ancient rhythms of college life. Martin and Geoffrey were at formal hall, and Peter was probably still at rowing practice. Their absence left me alone with my books and the increasingly impossible task I'd foolishly taken on. James Woodley, a finalist reading war studies, had asked for help with his dissertation on naval strategic theory. He'd noticed my endless reading about military history, an odd hobby for someone reading economics, and assumed I'd jump at the chance to assist a future officer. What he really wanted, of course, was someone to do the heavy lifting while he focused on his officer training. My desk had become a battlefield of its own. Sun Tzu's Art of War competed for space with Clausewitz's On War, Giulio Douhet's The Command of the Air, and newer texts on naval strategy. The challenge wasn't just understanding them, it was finding connections that would satisfy both Woodley's military ambitions and my own growing fascination with how these principles might apply beyond the battlefield. Then I felt her eyes on me, just there, settled in Peter's favourite chair by the fireplace, wearing a uniform with more gold stripes than I had seen before. She looked older than in recent visits. Silver threads in her hair caught the lamplight. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the institutional furniture and the photos of home we'd all blue-tacked to the walls, before settling on my cluttered desk. "Interesting collection," she said, reaching out as if to touch the spine of Mahan's The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, her hand passing through it like morning mist. Rather heavy reading for a fresher. Helping a finalist with his dissertation, I admitted, then caught myself. Well, supposed to be helping. I think I'm in over my head. She smiled at that, and I caught an echo of some private amusement. Show me. I shuffled through my notes, conscious of how juvenile my analysis might look to someone who actually commanded forces. He's writing about modern naval strategy, but I keep seeing parallels to other things. Like here, Sun Tzu says, "Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting." I think that applies beyond just military theory, but I can't quite make it concrete. She stood, moving to study my wall of notes. Her uniform caught the light strangely, like a photograph slightly out of focus. Tell me what you see. Patterns, I said, warming to the subject. The same principles keep appearing. Clausewitz talks about concentrating force at decisive points. Mahan discusses controlling vital channels of movement. Corbett emphasizes flexibility and adaptation. And Douay. I shuffled through my notes, energized by making connections. Douay argues that commanding the air means commanding everything below it, that a new dimension of movement changes all the old rules. They're not just talking about warfare, they're describing how complex systems interact under pressure, how new technologies can completely reshape the battlefield. She nodded, and I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Pride, perhaps, or recognition. And what happens when you take these theories beyond the military sphere? That's just it. I grabbed my notebook, excitement overtaking my usual uncertainty about these visits. Markets are complex systems under pressure. Think about technological disruption. It's like Douay's argument about air power. A new innovation comes along, and suddenly all the old defenses, all the traditional advantages become irrelevant. The high ground isn't high enough anymore. Because most people are stuck thinking tactically, not strategically. She smiled, and for a moment I thought I could imagine her as an admiral. The principles remain constant, only their application changes. Show me what you've written. She guided me through the texts for the next hour, pointing out connections I'd sensed but couldn't articulate. She spoke of naval formations and market penetration in the same breath, weaving together theories of conflict and competition into something new. The rain kept its steady rhythm against the medieval windows, accompanying our strange seminar. The ultimate victory, she said softly, is not in overwhelming force, but in reshaping the battlefield itself, in changing the rules of engagement. Turn weakness into advantage. She paused, and I felt the weight in her words. Remember that, James, for later. I looked up sharply, but she had moved to examine our college photos, studying the casual shots of 4 freshers trying to look like they belonged in this ancient place. You know, she said, the first naval academies taught secular navigation alongside strategic theory. The stars that guide ships through darkness were first mapped for war. Her fingers traced the air near my abandoned astronomy books, but now we use them to find our way home, to explore, to dream. The principles remain, but their application evolves. The light was fading outside my window. "Will any of this matter?" I asked. "These connections I'm seeing?" "Everything matters, James. Everything connects." She dusted her uniform subconsciously. "Just remember, strategy isn't about the fight. It's about understanding the shape of change." And there I was, alone with my books and notes, and the lingering sensation that I'd glimpsed something larger than Woodley's dissertation. I worked through the night, ideas flowing like constellations finding their pattern, never quite sure if I was discovering connections or creating them. Woodley's director of studies would later tell him the dissertation was surprisingly innovative. Woodley had just shrugged and accepted the first. I called it a birthday present from my mother, though of course I never said that part out loud. Some things are just for us to know. The rain had stopped by the time my roommates returned, bringing the usual chaos of college life back to our set. They found me surrounded by books and papers, still writing, trying to capture something I couldn't quite explain about stars and strategies and the patterns that connect everything, if only you know how to look. Chapter 4. The Archives. April 15th, 2007. The London Metropolitan Archives smelled of dust and secrets. Rain drummed against the high windows, turning the reading room into a cave of whispers and rustling paper. 19 today, and instead of celebrating with uni-mates, I was hunched over a microfiche reader, searching through endless columns of 1988 newspapers for any trace of my beginning. The social services files had been disappointingly thin. Only in the past few months had the General Register Office reluctantly relented and done their legal duty, dredging them up and releasing what they had. Found in alley off South Wharf Road near St Mary's, mother unknown, good health, no signs of exposure despite April chill. The old records officer had been kind but apologetic. Many files from that era weren't properly digitized, love, but you might try the newspaper archives. So here I was. My eyes burned from hours of scanning blurred text. The April grey of London reminded me of seeing her and made me wonder if she'd come. But this was different. This time I had questions. This time I had, "You won't find what you're looking for." And she was just sitting there, perched on the edge of the reading desk, her uniform crisp and dry, despite the torrent outside. She looked so young, barely older than me. Long waves of dark hair tied tightly in a military bun. Her eyes held pain and discomfort as she watched me. "I found something," I whispered, conscious of the few other researchers scattered around in the nearby rooms. I pulled out the carefully preserved photocopy and read it to her. Police report. April 15th, 1988. Elderly homeless man, Ernest, last name withheld, flagged down beat officer near Paddington station, led PCs to woman found in distress in alley off South Wharf Road near St Mary's. Witness claimed she appeared out of nowhere. Woman in late stages of labour. By the time medical response arrived, I swallowed hard. By the time they arrived, only the baby, only I, was there. They searched, but never found the woman. She had run away, leaving me alone. She reached for the paper, her hand passing through it like a shadow with disappearing sunlight. "Ernest," she said softly. "I never knew his name. He was so kind, so concerned. Found me collapsed in his cardboard pitch, kept saying, 'Hold on, love, help's coming.' But I couldn't. The shock, She caught herself. "You deserve to know the truth, my truth at least." "Which is?" I squinted, not sure what to expect. I was 22, graduated the year before, married in the Academy Chapel, and oh, we were so happy. Detailed together here in London for follow-on training, starting a family. It was the best of everything we could have hoped for. We didn't know. We couldn't have known. They were almost there. Things started smoothly, but I was in St Mary's Hospital in April 2139 with complications, and the docs thought they would lose me and the baby, so they put me in a suspension field. My husband was there, holding my hand. Something happened. I didn't know at the time, but the Imperium was suddenly everywhere, launching everything it had at us. London was obliterated. Not me, though. I was in that alley in 1988, crumpled in that cardboard castle, an old guy's pitch, with this frantic, scary-looking old codger hovering over me. He told me to hang on and flagged down a couple of PCs, and they tried to help, holding me and crying for me to stick with them until the ambulance got there.
You were coming. Nothing could stop that. And you did. And they held you out for me to see, and you let out the sweetest sound a mother can hear. And then they disappeared, or rather, I did. I must have flashed back to St Mary's in my own time. It was nothing but rubble. The suspensor field must have cradled me from the blast, or I would have been incinerated or crushed. They found me 2 days later. Everyone else... Her voice cracked. Everyone else was gone. It was the Imperium's first strike, and it wiped London off the map. I stared at her, the microfiche forgotten. That's impossible. So is this. So are these birthdays. So is the fact that I dream about you every single night, even though you won't be born for another 130 years. I dream about you too. I hesitated. I think I'm going mad. Her laugh was soft, sad. My commanding officer suggested psychiatric evaluation when I kept insisting my son was alive in the past. They showed me the rubble. No one survived. Only me. I learned to stop talking about it, and I decided to fix it. To take it back to the Imperium. She glanced at the newspaper archives. You won't find me there, James, but I'm here. However impossible that is, I'm here. The pelting against the windows got louder, drowning out the whispers of paper and research. A young woman walked by on the way to the stacks, and I fought the urge to cry out. I used to think, I said carefully, that if I could just find evidence, some proof that you were real. You and me both. Are you my safety delusion, created to fill a void? For my loss? Losses? No. I looked down at the police report, at Ernest's statement about a woman being there and then gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the weight of something that can't be real, but is. Like I'm perpetually caught between what I know and what I can't know. She stiffened. Is this real? I asked, my voice barely a breath. Are you? I ask myself that every time I see you, every birthday we spend together. She dusted off imaginary lint. I might dream about you every night, but I get to be with you once a year. If this is madness, it's the most precious kind. The storm began to ease, and I knew our time was growing short. Will you tell me more? About your time? About what happened? Some things have to unfold when it's right, she said. But James, that burden you're carrying, you're not carrying it alone. Somewhere, somewhen, I'm carrying it too, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I felt a warm glow inside, with old newspapers, a police report, and the lingering sensation of belonging to someone. I carefully packed away the archives, knowing I wouldn't find what I wanted. The truth wasn't written in any record, it lived in these moments of stolen time. Chapter 5. The Olympic Summer. April 15, 2012. Buckets of grey soup, unending rain, unusual for a London summer, but then again, this was Olympic year. The city was transforming itself, trying to put its best foot forward, though apparently no one had told the weather. I loitered outside the Spaghetti House on Bryanston Street, watching umbrellas battle the onslaught, not knowing if she would show up. Lots of news to tell her if she did. 24 years old today, and my startup was either going to change the world or spectacularly implode. Probably both. The weight of payroll and investor expectations pressed down harder than the sky. I was quite full of myself, albeit a bit peckish. Then I felt it, that familiar whisper of memory against my elbow, like a photograph coming to life. "You look tired," she said, touching my elbow. Not arriving, not approaching, just there, as always. I turned and caught my breath. She looked so impossibly young and vulnerable in her combat gear, her lieutenant's gold stripes the same dulled-out camouflage as the grey of the drizzle. She looked not much older than me, which was always disconcerting. "Long week," I said, trying not to react when a passing businessman walked straight through her. Closing on funding, staving off licensing issues, the usual startup drama. "How long do we have?" "You know," she smiled, the familiar dance of our conversations. "An hour, maybe 2. Italian?" She gestured at the restaurant, staring at the innocuous black door with the quaint glass-encased menu outside. I nodded, heading for the door. "The tricolour salad is otherworldly, and they do great veal, and they have a nice syrah. Is that okay?" "Sure," she said, her smile gentle. It didn't really matter. She couldn't actually eat or drink, but a quiet Italian place to chat was what we needed. A group of Olympic volunteers in their purple uniforms passed through her as I held the door open, apparently for no one. It was still months until the Olympic Games began, but they were clearly out in full force, training and practicing. Inside, the maitre d' raised an eyebrow at my table for 2 request, but I was used to that. Used to a lot of things. I positioned myself so I could see her, but to others I appeared to be gazing out the window. The waiter placed a second water glass that would remain untouched. "So," she said, once he had left, "tell me everything." Dinner was sweet. The waiter suggested the soup in addition to the tomato, avocado and mozzarella salad, but he wasn't sure what the soup was, so the chef came out and explained that it was pure vegetarian. I was only a vegetarian when I skipped eating meat, nor was it low-fat, an abomination. "No fat?" I asked. "No, very rich, all fat." She clucked at me under her breath. The very rich was undoubtedly tons of butter, not exactly healthy even for a 20-something. But she would never press me. Sadly, prodding wouldn't have hurt my feelings, but she knew better. I had made it this far without her daily guidance. I described our issues with locking down licenses on my work from Cambridge, keeping my voice low and pretending to study the menu while I talked. She listened intently, occasionally shifting her gaze as other diners walked by, eyeing her empty chair with raised eyebrows. "Have you considered looking at the Freedom of Individual Contributors Act?" she asked. "Or am I too early for that?" I started to shake my head, then stopped, conscious of appearing to react to nothing. That's not something I've heard of. It might be worth looking into. You know, I keep in touch with my guardian from back when I was a ward of the court, the first one. She's an MP in the Commons now. She is very current. She smiled. Current being the operative word. I observed her, noting how the candlelight passed through her face, yet somehow magically caught in her eyes. "So, how is it?" I asked. I could see the wear in the corners of her eyes, even through the smile. She couldn't have been more than a couple of years older than I was, but the age was already deep-seated. "When is it? When did you see me last?" "Let me see your arm." She pulled up her sleeve, and I counted. "Maybe 2 years ago? Let's see. You were very early, just deploying. Hundreds of ships. It was a bit creepy." She sighed, carrying a story she wasn't willing to share yet. "I'm here, aren't I?" She didn't want to say out loud what we both knew. Maybe I would always be the reason she was still alive. "You know that show you told me about a long time ago? It was finally on, just like you said it would be. I have watched it over and over, wondering why you told me to never blink. But there it was. Duck. And then I understood. Well, at least I think I understand why you told me things would always be out of sequence, and that I should just play along." She just smiled. They had argued about it on some birthdays, and on some, I just felt sad. This time, I didn't, and I even felt reinvigorated and a bit upbeat. "I have a surprise for you." "Really? I thought there weren't any surprises." "Well, only in the order you find out about them. I actually wonder why you never mentioned this one." "Oh, silly," she perked up, clearly remembering what it was. "Some things you just need to find out yourself." The conversation continued as it always did, carefully measuring my responses to look like I was lost in thought rather than deep in conversation with an empty chair. I told her about the confederation I was building, my voice barely above a whisper, about the classmates joining me to develop software we would spread to the world, free for any and all to build upon and call their own. And, as always, she just nodded and smiled proudly, like she already knew. But she did. She always knew. The waiter came round, topped off my syrah, and asked if I wanted anything sweet for dessert. "No time," I said and laughed, and she did too. The waiter looked at me blankly and wandered away, shaking his head. I paid as I had to, and we returned to the street. The tricolour, fat soup and veal were good. "I'm glad we enjoyed it," she said in jest, "but it is always too short." "I know," she said, serious now. Her eyes met mine, somehow both young and impossibly aged. "I know. You carry the burden, I don't. A message for the log. We almost lost to the Imperium this time because they rounded the sun with a new drive we hadn't seen before. It has a new ultra-wideband damper around the core. We only saw it because I knew to look for the multispectral separation of the decay field. You need to tell me on the visit before this one. When you tell me to duck." "How will I know when?" "Well, birthdays. It happened last year. Check my tattoos." She held out her wrist again. All the visits were etched on her inner arm. "This is number 7. I'll have 6. "When will it be?" "I don't know, just keep track." I felt that whisper of memory against my forehead as she brushed away my hair. "Happy birthday, sweetie." Chapter 6. The IPO Birthday. April 15, 2018. I slipped away from the champagne and congratulations at the Gherkin, leaving my board to celebrate without me. 30 years old today, newly minted tech millionaire, and all I could think about was whether she would appear. The rain-slicked streets of Marylebone reflected the evening lights as I made my way to Sandy's, knowing George would be there in his usual corner booth. He'd been my first investor. He'd heard through the grapevine that I was pulling together a startup with my classmates, and he came in anonymously as an angel investor. When it came time for real money, he'd reluctantly asked to meet me in person, at Sandy's, of course. He was not what I expected, and maybe that was why we hit it off. He was the only person who knew about her visits, or at least was willing to play along, not thinking I was totally crazy as a grown man with an imaginary friend. One year he'd been there on my birthday, watching me talk to empty air with his kind, understanding eyes. Instead of questioning my sanity, he'd become the one I could talk to about her. Maybe because he understood what it meant to be alone. The bell above Sandy's door chimed as I entered. George looked up from his laptop, his massive frame squeezed into the booth's worn leather. The place was nearly empty, perfect for tonight. "Shouldn't you be popping champagne somewhere?" he asked as I slid into the booth across from him. The waitress appeared with a menu I didn't need. "Had enough of that, and I noticed you didn't show up either," I said after ordering. "Needed somewhere quiet." George nodded, understanding. "It's your birthday, isn't it?" Huh? He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention. "You know I didn't come to the IPO today because I don't fit in, right? Not because it wasn't important." He paused, studying me. "Is she here yet?" "Not yet." I glanced at the empty space beside me. "Sometimes she's late. Sometimes she doesn't come at all." "Tell me again," George said softly, "about the first time you saw her." I smiled, grateful for his gentle prompting. He often did this, asked questions that helped me make sense of it all. I was 5, foster home, alone upstairs, playing with a used Matchbox car. And then she was just there. She appeared by the window in uniform, watching me. When I said hello, she seemed surprised I could see her. Like the one she wears now. Different ranks, different times, all jumbled. Never know when she is from. I think she was pretty high up then. I remember the gold shoulder boards with a crown, some swords and I think some stars, and her hair was grey. George absorbed this, his eyes thoughtful. Admiralty. And no one else ever sees her. Just me, like now. Because there she was, suddenly beside me, once again in full combat gear, but sweaty and dirty. Black streaks on her cheeks, dark hair clipped short. I tried not to react, but George saw my slight shift. "She's here?" he whispered. I looked back and forth. "Are you okay?" I asked her, not sure whether to be concerned or not. She just nodded, a bit solemn, and studied George with evident curiosity. "He knows about me?" she asked, ignoring my question. She was a soldier, a sailor or commander. I was never quite sure, and she never really explained. I sensed she was in the heat of combat, and maybe this time together was a slight reprieve from the violence. "Yes," I replied, then caught George's questioning look. "She's asking about you." "Tell her," George hesitated, then smiled. "Tell her thank you, for whatever guidance and inspiration she has given you. Your confederation and opening up software has changed everything." I relayed his message. She laughed, that wonderful sound I'd treasured for those brief moments once a year. "Tell him thank you instead. What he accomplished was so important. We still talk about him and Hugo at the academy, and tech still relies on the techniques they pioneered." I swallowed hard before relaying this to George. His eyes welled up slightly. Mother smiled at this, though, of course, George couldn't see it. "I like him," she said. "He understands." The waitress brought our food, my usual and George's enormous pizza. For a while, we ate in comfortable silence, George pretending not to notice me, conversing occasionally with empty air. She shook her head. "So, today, this was your big opening day, right?" She gestured between us. "George, he was your original funder? Why aren't you two off celebrating? Isn't that something everyone does after their magic debut?" "It's a circus, and we are, here, with you." I reached for her hand and felt that glimmer of almost memory, almost touch. "If you're up for it, I could use some strategic advice, though. You always said your first command taught you everything about managing chaos." She beamed, happy we were connecting. She leaned forward. "Tell me about your flanks." We spent the next hour translating military strategy into market dynamics. She taught me about defensive positions and calculated risks, using terms that would sound perfectly natural in tomorrow's Financial Times. I was scribbling furiously, while George buried himself back in his laptop. "One more thing," she said as she finished. "After your lockup, sell 10% when your price hits £32.50. Trust me on this." I'd learned to trust her impossible knowledge years ago. "Anything else?" She glanced at her watch, a heavy military thing with too many dials. "Yes, stop wearing blue shirts. The yellow undertone doesn't suit you. And—" She paused, considering. "That pain in your knee next month, get it checked. Early physio makes all the difference." Then she was standing, dusting off her fatigues. The debris fell to the floor and disappeared. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Give them hell." I stood, wishing I could hug her, almost believing I had caught the fumes of combat. "Be careful out there, whatever battle you're in." I felt a wisp as she reached over and touched my cheek. "Remember, 32.50, and she was gone. I sat with George a while longer, watching the rain, nothing to say. Chapter 7. The Strategy Session. April 15th, 2022. The hostile takeover bid hit the newswires at dawn. By noon, our stock had plunged 30%, and my board panicked. I'd spent the morning in emergency meetings, watching a decade of work teeter on the edge of someone else's ambitions. 34 years old today, and instead of celebrating, I faced the genuine possibility of losing everything I'd built. I slipped away from the chaos just before sunset, seeking refuge in my private office on the 40th floor. Canary Wharf stretched out below, London's familiar spires now dwarfed by the glass and steel monuments of progress. Progress that suddenly felt very fragile. The takeover attempt had been masterfully planned. They'd spent months quietly accumulating shares through shell companies, building alliances with our smaller investors. Now, they were moving to seize control of the board, promising our shareholders a premium if they'd support the hostile acquisition. It was elegant, ruthless, and terrifyingly effective. I stood at the window, watching the April rain trace patterns on the glass, and wondered if she would come. Some birthdays she didn't, and I'd learned to accept that. But today, more than ever, I needed. "Your flanks are exposed." And she was there, reflected in the rain-streaked window beside me. Not arriving, not approaching, just there, wearing the crisp uniform of a fleet commander, newly minted braids gleaming on her shoulders. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes carried the fierce intensity of someone who had fought their way up through the ranks faster than anyone expected. Basically my age, maybe 35, she radiated the energy of an officer who had earned her position through innovation rather than time served. "I know," I said, turning to face her. "They've been positioning for months, building up resources. We never saw it coming." She shook her head, moving to study the tactical displays I'd set up on my desk. Market projections, shareholder analyses, news feeds. Her movements carried the sharp precision of someone still adapting to command, eager to prove their rapid promotion justified. "You saw it. You just didn't recognize what you were seeing. Show me what you have." I fell into our familiar pattern, laying out the situation as if delivering a military briefing. She listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that made me see things I'd missed. The rain drummed against the windows, creating a rhythm for our impossible conversation. "Look at the pattern," she said, gesturing at the shareholder map. Watching her, listening to her now as always, I couldn't help but feel the confidence of someone who had probably revolutionized combat doctrine. She'd mentioned it once in passing, how often they had tapped her for accelerated promotion. "They're not just accumulating positions, they're isolating your strongest supporters, creating corridors of vulnerability. It's classic encirclement." I stared at the display, seeing it through new eyes. "Like cutting supply lines?" "Exactly." She smiled, proud and fierce. "They're treating this like a military campaign because that's exactly what it is. But they've made a critical mistake." "What's that?" "They think they're fighting a conventional battle. They're not." She straightened, and suddenly I saw the commander who had faced down alien armadas. They're fighting an asymmetric war. They just don't know it yet. The next hour became a masterclass in strategy. She walked me through defensive positions I'd never considered, showing me how to turn our weaknesses into strengths. Every time I protested that we didn't have the resources to fight back, she showed me how to use that very limitation as an advantage. "Remember," she said, "the weaker the position, the stronger the response must be. You don't need more resources, you need better thinking." Something about that phrase tickled at my memory, but before I could grasp it, she was moving on, outlining a counter-strategy that was breathtaking in its elegance. "Use their size against them," she continued. "They're expecting you to defend traditionally. Instead, distribute your assets and create multiple fronts. Make them chase shadows while you strike at their core assumptions." I took furious notes, my mind racing ahead to implementation. "The pension funds," I said suddenly. "They're counting on their support. But if we can show that the takeover threatens long-term stability, now you're thinking." She rested her hand on my shoulder, and I felt that familiar whisper of memory, like morning fog trying to become solid. "You don't have to be stronger. You just have to be smarter." The rain had stopped, and the office was growing dark. I knew our time was nearly up, but I had to ask, "Will it work?" She smiled, that enigmatic smile I'd known since childhood. "That depends on you. But James, remember, sometimes the best defense isn't a wall. Sometimes it's a web." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with my notes and a strategy that felt both impossible and inevitable. I spent the next hour refining the plan, seeing how each piece could lock into place. It was elegant,
unconventional and absolutely frightening. Just like talking to your unborn mother about corporate takeover defenses should be. 3 weeks later, when the dust settled, the financial press would call our defense revolutionary and unprecedented. The Harvard Business Review would spend thousands of words analyzing how a mid-sized tech company had outmaneuvered one of the largest conglomerates in Europe. They used words like black swan and paradigm shifting. I just called it another birthday present from my mother. Chapter 8. The Echo of Laughter. April 15, 2027. 4 days in the maternity ward had carved deep shadows under my eyes. My wife lay sleeping, finally, her colour better than yesterday, but still too pale. The doctors spoke carefully of complications resolved and continued observation, their relief evident but guarded. William, our miracle of 3 days ago, slept swaddled in the bassinet beside his mother's bed, tiny and perfect despite his dramatic entrance into the world. 39 today, though celebration felt remote after the terror of nearly losing them both. I stood at the window, watching April drizzle trace patterns on the glass, and thought about mothers and children and the thin spaces between life and death. In his few quiet moments, I'd already caught glimpses of the Whitehall features in William's face, my chin, my father's brow, and something else, something older that echoed through time. "He has your grandmother's eyes." I looked up, and there she was, standing by the bassinet in a drab blue-grey shipboard uniform, gold commander's stripes on her collar looking faded, weathered now by years of combat. Not arriving, not approaching, just there. But something was wrong. Her hair had escaped its severe bun, her blouse wrinkled, and her eyes shadowed as I'd never seen before. For once, we seemed nearly the same age, or maybe she was slightly younger, perhaps 38. She carried herself with measured grace, an officer who had survived enough battles to know that victory often looked different than expected. "Are you all right?" I whispered, conscious of my sleeping wife nearby. She tried to smile, but it cracked at the edges, the subtle lines of someone who had commanded through too many losses. Hard year, hard, weak. We lost the Centauri defense line, 300 ships, 15,000 crew. Her voice caught, carrying the weight of command decisions I couldn't imagine. So many sons and daughters. The weight of grief settled in the room like dust. I wanted to offer some consolation, but found myself frozen between my wife's bedside and the window. As if sensing my turmoil, she shook her head. "No, don't. This moment, this is what I needed to see." She moved closer, squeezing past the medical equipment. "May I?" I nodded, and she held her hands over William, not touching, she never could, but creating a ghost memory of a blessing. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We almost lost them both," I said softly, the words still bitter with recent fear. "The doctors said it was very complicated, getting too old." "The Whitehall men," she said with a sad smile. "You never come into this world easily." She straightened, the gold stripes sparkling in the fading light. "But we will do our best for you, as your wife did, like I did. Sometimes the most challenging battles are fought in the quietest settings." William stirred in his bassinet,
making those small mewling sounds that were already becoming familiar. My mother's hands remained suspended over him, trembling slightly. "You know what I remember most about my early commands?" she said suddenly, and I felt the weight of her responsibility, the wisdom carved into her features. Not the victories, the losses, the letters I had to write to families, the empty chairs at briefings. She straightened, her commander's stripes shimmering differently for me, a badge of sacrifice rather than ambition. But then I think about the futures those losses saved. William's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment 3 generations of our impossible family gazed at each other, almost as if his infant eyes could see her and perceive her presence. In the quiet beeping of monitors and the soft whishing of hospital air, I felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. All the birthdays, all the battles, all the slivers between survival and loss. "I used to wonder," I said carefully, "if I would ever tell him about you, about our birthdays together." "What did you decide?" "I haven't. But watching you with him now, maybe some things don't need to be told. Maybe they're just known somewhere deeper than memory." She smiled then, a genuine smile that chased some of the shadows from her eyes. "That the way he has my eyes?" "Exactly like that." We sat quietly as William drifted back to sleep. My mother began humming something low and sweet, a lullaby she had never gotten to sing to her own baby. "This was good," she said finally. "Today, after everything." She straightened her uniform, composure returning. "What do you mean?" "The universe writes its stories in circles, dear heart. We've lost a lot to the Imperium, but it is not over yet. I needed to meet a grandson, to know it will be real, and somehow that makes everything else bearable." She reached out, her hand passing through William's sleeping form like morning mist. The sunset had faded to dusk, and I hesitantly asked, "Will you tell me?" I watched her flinch. "About the battle you lost?" She shook her head. "Some griefs are best left behind. But this moment, this belongs to all of us." She smiled that familiar, impossible smile I was learning to yearn for, waiting for my birthday to roll around again. "The Whitehall men, James. Sometimes we have to lose sight of one generation to see the next one shine." Then she was gone, leaving me with my son and the echo of a lullaby I had never heard. Chapter 9. The Warning. April 15, 2042. The rain pelted the ancient glass in my study, a rhythm older than my weary years. I flipped through the tattered and yellowed pages of my notebook, its pages worn soft with years of examination, as if reading the signs would make her appear. And it did, and my heart froze. She was crouched in a combat stance, wearing dark camo I hadn't seen before, and a tactical helmet with the dull stripes of a lieutenant commander. Blood trickled from a cut above her eye, and black grime covered her cheeks and hands. I thought I could smell the char of close-quarters firefight. I was terrified. "Negative on Deck 7, she barked to someone I couldn't see, then lurched to her feet and spun around, disoriented. "Ah, shit! What? Where?" Her eyes found mine, but they were wild, unfocused. "James?"
No, not now. Oh God, not now. Please, not now. I just can't. They're dying. Surprised us. Boarding. She choked back a sob and started shaking. Mom, I said urgently, I need to see your arm. She was already turning back to whatever battle she'd left. I can't. 3 decks. They've already slaughtered everyone on 3 decks. I have to... Your arm, please, it's important. I rose and moved to her, reaching out, struggling to keep my voice steady. The tattoos, I need to count them. She glanced at her inner arm. 6. Why? James, I'm in the middle of... 6. My hands shook as I flipped through my notebook. 6 tattoos meant this was it. This was the moment she'd told me about the warning I had to give. But now that it was here, its weight threatened to bring me to my knees. Listen to me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. When you go back, right after you go back, you need to duck. What? Her hands were trembling, eyes darting to threats I couldn't see. James, they're killing everyone. The Imperium, they had a new way of hiding in plain sight, a new drive we hadn't seen before. We never saw them. We pulled right into their trap. They're boarding and... Her breath hitched. Medical's gone. Engineering's gone. They're all dying under my command. Duck! I nearly shouted it, then forced myself to be calmer. Promise me, the instant you return, duck. Your life depends on it. That cut through her panic. Her tactical training asserted itself, and she finally focused on me fully. The transformation was remarkable. The wild-eyed survivor becoming the officer I knew she'd become. Explain, quickly. I can't. I just know you have to. I moved closer, close enough to feel that gossamer whisper of her presence. There is an old show someday you'll tell me to watch. I watched over and over, statues, angels weeping, and if you blink, they get you. You told me to watch it when I was a kid, and then to tell you to duck when the time came. I don't understand. Of course. No, maybe not. I'm telling you, and you will tell me. I was confused and getting worried. What if I wasn't getting this sequence right? For her, that conversation hadn't happened yet. It might never happen now because this was the source of it. I was the source of it. She stared at me, then down at her arm. I pointed, almost touching. This one, this moment, it matters. More than maybe any other. I gestured to my notebook. You told me to wait, and someday I would see only these and this last one. Which means what? Her voice cracked. James, my crew is dying, right now, while we talk. And they'll keep dying if you don't listen to me. I met her eyes, seeing the echo of the admiral she would become in the frightened lieutenant commander she was now. Everything, all our visits, all our moments, they only happen if you survive the next few minutes. She started to speak, then froze, as distant sounds only she could hear made her flinch. How can you be so sure about this? Because you told me, will tell me. You said this warning saved your life. I watched the familiar play of confusion cross her face, the vertigo we'd learned to live with. More are coming. You told me it's some sort of multispectral separation, the decay field, an ultra-wideband damper around the core. That's how they caught you unawares. She took a deep breath and peered intently into my eyes, searching for truth, searching for meaning. You survive this day, I know you do, because you're going to visit me many more times.
You're going to see my children born, guide me through impossible decisions, meet your great-grandson. Stop! She pressed her hands to her temples. Too much. Just remember one thing then. Duck the instant you return. I tried to smile. Trust your son? The battle-hardened officer warred with the mother she was becoming. Finally, she nodded. I trust you. I always will, even when it makes no sense. She glanced at her arm again. 6 visits, so we've barely begun? Many more to come, I promised, if you duck. The air around her began to shimmer, and I knew our time was up. Her form was already growing transparent, but her eyes held mine fiercely. James, her voice carried both command and tenderness. Thank you for all of it, even the parts I haven't lived yet. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with my dog-eared notebook. I sank into my chair, heart racing. Somewhere, somewhen, a young lieutenant commander had returned to her ship in the midst of a life-and-death battle. I knew she would survive, because she had survived, because I had warned her, because she had told me to warn her. The rain continued its patient drumming against my window, marking time in its own way. I touched the star patterns I'd drawn so carefully, thinking about circles and sacrifice and echoes of birthdays. About all the birthdays yet to come, all the moments that hinged on a single movement, a simple duck. Some things, after all, were just for us to know. Chapter 10. The First for Her. April 15, 2057. The spring evening had settled into my bones, making my joints ache despite the warmth of my study. 69 years old today, and I found myself watching the shadows lengthen across my desk, wondering if she would come. After all these birthdays, I still never knew for sure. The familiar photographs watched over me, my children's graduations, the day we took the company public, a lifetime of moments, each shaped in some way by her visits, her guidance, her love. I thought I felt a shift in the air, and then I saw her, and I wanted to weep. She was terrified, crouching by my window, eyes wide. Her uniform was pristine, unmarked by combat, a freshly frocked sub-lieutenant. Over the years, I'd finally gotten to recognize all the epaulets. Short sleeves, and I gasped, no tattoos. This was it. Her face was so young, so confused, so scared. Her hands trembled as she stared at me with wild eyes. What's happening? Who are you? Where am I? My heart clenched. I knew this moment would come. I had always known it would come. She had hinted at it many times, but never told me the details. Her first visit, a year after I was born. It's all right, I said softly, struggling to rise from my chair. You're safe. She backed away, standing up against the window, shaking her head. This is just a hallucination. They told me this would happen. I'm still in my cabin. I'm just sick. You're safe, I said again. You survived the attack. They found you. Everyone else died in the Imperium's attack, but not you. She shook her head slowly. No, that's not possible. How would you know that? The rescue teams found you in the rubble of St. Mary's. Your suspension field saved you, and they detected its signal. She stammered, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. The doctors. I kept insisting my baby was alive, born somewhere impossible. They said it was trauma that I needed to accept. I thought I was going mad. Don't let them bully you into believing you're crazy. You gave birth in a cardboard pitch, and your baby survived. Your son. They've almost convinced me. I was sure I'd imagined it all. I lost everything in that attack. Her jaw tightened. They will pay. I will spend the rest of my life beating them. And you will. Defeat them. It will take a long time. There are so many things to learn and things you will apply. Remember studying Whitehall, strategy and tactics. At the academy, you'll make it your cornerstone. Take the fight back to the Imperium. Anticipate, know their flanks, exploit their overconfidence. She swayed, and I gestured to the leather armchair beside my desk. She sank into it, anxiety melting into skepticism. This makes no sense. You're speaking riddles and telling me things you can't possibly know. I leaned forward, wishing I could take her hand, knowing I couldn't. This is real. All of it. You and I, we're going to see each other again and again, always on his birthday. And we will have impossible conversations that are all real. On birthdays? Yes, I said carefully, measuring my words. Once a year, on April 15th. Sometimes each of us will be younger, sometimes older. Out of sequence, but always connected. Always your son. Always me. She stood abruptly, pacing the room. That's impossible. Time doesn't work that way. Reality doesn't work that way. No wonder they think I am going crazy. And yet, here we are. I watched her move with the first vestiges of the poise that would strengthen with years of conflict, combat, and command. Her pristine blue and gold uniform catching the lamplight at odd angles. You know what happened at St. Mary's wasn't normal. The suspension field. Something changed that day. Something connected us across time itself. She stopped, staring at the photographs on my desk. Are those your children?
Your grandchildren, I said softly. And their children. A whole future you helped shape, one birthday at a time. And you have a new great-grandson, healthy and loud, born last week, a little more than half a stone. Blimey, did his father weep? You'd think he was the birthing one. Eyes so pure, just like yours, and a full head of dark hair. They've named him Marcus. Marcus Whitehall. After the strategist? The one I studied? The one you mentioned? No, I said simply, waiting for her to catch up. How do I... Is he... I don't understand. You don't have to understand. Not yet. For now, know that you're not alone. We're on this journey together. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so scared. I know. I smiled, remembering all the times she had comforted me. But you're the bravest person I've ever known, and you're going to be amazing. Will I see you again? Many times. For you, it's just the beginning, the first of many birthdays we'll have together. She nodded slowly, processing.
I should... Then I will find a way to remember this, for next time. Yes, you will. We will. Every visit, every conversation, they'll all become part of who we are for each other. Even the impossible parts. Especially the impossible parts. The evening light was fading, and I could see her form beginning to shimmer. It's time, I said. But remember, you're not mad. You're not alone. Then she slipped away, leaving me with a lifetime of memories and the knowledge that somewhen a young mother was beginning to understand that the impossible could also be real. I sat in my study as night fell, smiling. She would see me again as a child, young man and father, but I would always remember this moment, when I gave her a birthday gift she had given me so many times, that some things were just for us to know. Epilogue, The Final Visit, April 15, 2063. The fire painted shadows across my study walls as I waited, watching Marcus carefully arrange my ancient matchbox cars on the Persian rug. Outside, a spring storm lashed against the windows, the same kind of rain that had fallen on so many birthdays over the years. I'd scrounged the toys from the attic just for his visit, and they fascinated him the way they once had me, their worn metal bodies carrying whispers of countless imagined adventures. George had insisted on being here, his massive frame somehow fitting perfectly in my old leather armchair, just as it had at Sandy's all those years ago. He'd sensed I'd want him there at my 75th. He watched Marcus with that same gentle understanding he'd always shown me, his eyes carrying decades of shared, impossible truths. Then she was there, one more time, as always. Not arriving, not approaching, just there, settling into the chair across from George by the fire. The Admiralty blues seemed to catch every flicker of flame, the crown, crossed swords, and the 2 stars gleaming on each shoulder, her collar showing the discreet decoration of her total victory over the Imperium. Just like I remembered, oh, so long ago. Her hair had gone completely silver, but her eyes, my eyes, still held the depth of years. Poised and timeless, like she had nowhere else to be, nothing more important to do than to be right here, right now. "He's so much like you," she said softly, watching Marcus. "I finally met you for the first time, on your 5th birthday, a year ago. For me, that is. You were so sweet and lonely. Is that blue Mini the same car?" Her smile held volumes. "It's been so long for you, hasn't it?" I choked up and nodded, the ghost memory of her standing at the window, crashing outward in waves. 70 long years to see her again as she was then. She soothed me with, "Some things are just for us to know." I caught George's slight nod. He'd heard my sharp intake of breath, and he knew she was here. After all these years, he still played along and never questioned my sanity, this constant friend who'd weathered every storm with me. It was a time of storytelling. Marcus had grown used to me spinning tales of spaceships, alien invasions, and overcoming impossible odds. Even George sat spellbound at my litany, colourful and entertaining, but forging a lasting foundation in Marcus's subconscious. I watched my grandson's hands move the cars with deliberate purpose, already showing the strategic mind that would one day change everything. My tales wove together tactics built on top of Aesop's morals, Grimm's enchantments, and Tolkien's epic quests, peppered with sprinkles of theories, dredged from my college memories of all the old war masters, balancing risk and reward, darkness and light. Never too scary, always with a single strategic point and hopeful climax. Nurturing Marcus's imagination with the same seeds my mother had planted in mine, her battlefield wisdom becoming my compass through boardrooms and beyond, now transformed into bedtime stories for a boy who would hold the stars in his hands. The matchbox cars never stopped moving. Marcus carefully raced them hither and yon, but my mother whispered, "He just made the asymmetric response. Did you see the way the VW Bug outmaneuvered the 18-wheeler?" The pride in her voice echoed across generations. I caught my mother's eye and smiled. "Ah, very nice, Marcus," I said. "There you go, just like that. You see, sometimes the best way to win isn't about having the biggest or the newest. Sometimes it's about understanding how to turn a weakness into a strength." Marcus beamed and looked up at me, his face caught in the firelight. "Little ones have to be faster and smarter." I wove the stories carefully, watching my mother affirm specific details and smile at others. The military strategy became a bedtime story, and the business lessons became prophecy, flowing together like tributary streams into a river of time. The storm outside provided a gentle counterpoint to the crackling fire, marking time in its own way. My son, William, Marcus's father, looked in at one point, bringing the scent of freshly brewed Earl Grey, biscuits, and concern with him. "Everything all right in here?" "Perfect," I assured him, catching the knowing look from George. "Just sharing some family history with your son." He smiled, that worried smile grown children give aging parents, but left the tea and withdrew, leaving us to our fireside adventures. The embers had burned low when Marcus finally dozed off on the rug, surrounded by his convoys of cars and trucks, their metal bodies dull in the dying light. My mother stood, straightening her uniform with that same precision I'd seen countless times before, her admiral's stars catching one last flare from the embers. "Will I see you again?" I asked. She crossed to me, and I felt that familiar whisper of memory against my chest as she touched my heart. "Always," she said. The fire crackled, sending up a spray of sparks that seemed to merge with her form. When I looked back, she was gone. George shifted in his chair, reaching for his cane. She was here? Yes, in her Admiralty blues. She just wanted to listen this time. The storm outside had gentled to a soft patter, like time itself winding down. I watched Marcus sleeping among the relic toys, already dreaming of strategies that would one day save Earth, and I smiled. The end. This has been Echoes of Birthdays, written by David Neyland, narrated by Adam Stone, an ElevenLabs V3 AI-generated voice. Copyright 2024, David Neyland. All rights reserved. Production copyright 2026, David Neyland. All rights reserved. Author's note. In the summer of the London Olympics 2012, we were sitting in our first-floor flat above Queen's Gardens, just up from Hyde Park and Lancaster Gate. It was 68 years after the Allies landed at Normandy. We were watching Sky documentaries and tributes to the Rangers who had scaled the cliffs at Pointe du Hoc, a sheer face that should have been impossible, and yet they climbed it. Vets retold the horrors and the heroism of that day. They had done the impossible. I could just imagine a distant relative standing at the top of that cliff, wondering, feeling the wisp of a touch on their shoulder. and then gone. Thus was born Echoes of Birthdays. David Neyland, December 2024. One more thing. By the way, if you like crossover stories, spend time with George in the short story Pizza Not for Takeout, written by David Neyland.